It feels like it's been a long time. I don't think it's been a particularly long time, but we were meeting with such frequency at some point that I feel denied your company. A lot's been happening since the last time we met. But first, I would just love to show the agenda, as I like to do at the beginning of the meeting. Here it is, though I'm looking at this and I realize I do not have a set of minutes for you. So when we set our next meeting, I will have the set of minutes and Steve's minutes because he's faster than I at the next. We're going to review the updated concept plans. Bill set forth the most recent iteration in December. And I'll explain to you the context of that and then let Bill talk us through anything that he sees fit with that. We need to discuss the request from the NRC for flagging and a site walk. And I'm so glad to have Liz and Bill in the same room to talk about that. We need to strategize for an upcoming public forum, which means we also need to set the date for the public forum. Next steps in advance of the CPC's vote, which is still pending. There have been several meetings, many meetings. When sometimes we come up, sometimes we don't, but I'll be able to give you the most recent sort of feedback from them and then public comment, and then we'll adjourn. Let me stop the share and just give you an update in general about where we've been and what we've been doing. We have a few more letters of support, well-placed, important letters, I think. The Concord Historical Commission, I presented to them, and they were the most loving, supportive group I think I have ever been before in all of my career as a volunteer. And they sent a lovely note along in support. Just a wonderful group. We also, Krista, help me with the phrasing. Is it the Assabet River Stewardship Council? Did I get that right?
No, the Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council.
Okay, Wild and Scenic. Okay. Had a wonderful meeting with that group. Also just incredibly supportive, generous, lovely people. And they have also, I haven't checked actually. They were going to send a letter right along in support. And then we also, which was important because it was requested by the CPC, we also received a letter of support with some conditions from Delia and the NRC. And they were just lovely too. I had a separate meeting with Delia and Greg Higgins, and Sue was there too. And they sort of told us what they could support, and just wanted us to do a couple of things. And I'll discuss that when we pull up the new schematic. So with that, shall I do that? Does anybody have anything to mention now, or shall we just get right into it with the schematic? Sound okay? All right, so let me pull that up. I'm going to share it. Can you see that? Can you see this map? Okay. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. Let me see. I can't see you. So there, I can see you now. This is the most recent December rendering. Is that right?
On my plan, the buffer zones are red, but other than that, yeah.
Yeah, the buffer zones, if I go in really, really close, they're red.
Okay.
In your previous iteration, they were bright red. For some reason, they sort of came down a little bit in tone in this, but that I'm sure is an easy fix.
Yeah.
So what Bill did here was he met the sort of some of the conditions. There are a few more now, but he met the conditions of the NRC. And what we didn't want to do is you know, I don't know who's best to speak about this, whether it's Bill or Liz or me, but you know, there's so many little tweaks that are being requested, and it's actually, you know, it's not nothing to have Bill make these tweaks. I mean, it's his time, but it's also our money. And so I think, you know, that we don't want to just every time someone asks something, make a little change, but we do need to satisfy what the NRC is asking for. And so that's, I think, part of our dilemma, and we'll talk about what that means. But the differences you see here are this path has been pulled out of the 50, which this is the 25, this is the 50, and the path, though it skirts it in some places, it is truly outside of it. The other thing we've done is we've made these, at the specific request of the NRC, we've made these two things much smaller. They were looking at the previous iteration, the one that was public. I think there was one in between, but the one that was public, and they were estimating that these round circles, these sort of viewing posts, were 50 feet across. I don't know if that was the intention, but that's how they were reading it, and they refused to give their support for something that large. So I don't even know how many feet these are across as we're envisioning them here, which is why the NRC has asked what they exactly did with the Giroux land, which is for someone to flag this path and these so that they can eyeball it and tinker with it, and then give the full sort of force of their support after that. I will say that originally when I met, and most of us were there, but when we met with the NRC, they were even talking about taking these overlooks completely out of the 50. We had some rescuing comments from some members, Delia included, and Gary Kleiman specifically. Sue is really on top of this part, but as Gary and Sue, iterated there, if we can't see the river from the outlooks, there's not going to be much purpose in even having the outlook. So that's why we said, please let us put these overlooks into the 50 if it suits you, but keep the path outside of the 50. And that's what Bill has done. And we're grateful for it.
Arlene, can I ask a question about that?
Yes,
Because
yes.
I wonder if it's the degree of disturbance that's a problem or concerning to the NRC. I mean, I remember Sue made a good comment a while ago, like it's just nice to have a place to stop and sit and contemplate. So what if it's just an area that's large enough for a bench? I mean, what's the purpose in having kind of an oval there, I guess?
And that's true. It's not even benches here. I don't know. We can talk to Bill about that, but it's more, we wanted to put some informative panels on one of them about the status of the wild and scenic river and perhaps some of the vegetation in and around the area. And this one was just going to be, sort of a semicircle, just a place, like an obvious place to gather and look out and to look across the river. I don't think it's considered or intended to be anything more formal than that. Bill, what are your thoughts related to Krista's comment and also what these would look like?
We have a walking path, and we need someplace that's, if you get tired, you want to step off and out of the way of the path.
Mhm.
And we thought that an overlook would be the right place to do it, because you're
Right.
going to have a scenic view. You're going to be able, I'll meet you at the first overlook, that kind of thing. And you won't be obstructing anybody else if you take a seat on the overlook. So especially the southerly overlook, where you really get the divide of the river and the stream coming in, and you're on the top of the very steep embankment.
Mhm.
That one has some really, really nice views. And you can see the river, you can see the otters that play in the water sometimes. So that one has the best views. The other one is just related to the sunken lawn as a gathering spot prior to going to there, or it's a hub.
They didn't seem upset at all about the placement and the existence of these. They just wanted their sort of footprint to be a little smaller, Krista.
Yep, they were drawn generously. Yep.
Right.
I would say that the pushback we got from the NRC was that it's their job to protect nature, and it's explicitly not their job to do anything for human beings.
Right.
And they were concerned about the value of the area as a wildlife corridor. As far as they're concerned, they'd probably prefer there not to be any path or park at all in terms of wildlife, but then they understand that there are competing interests in the town, and the question is not what they would feel is best for nature, but what is appropriate in terms of everything that goes on in town. So, I mean, to my mind, the point of the overlooks is to see the river, which is a beautiful area for the sake of human beings to look at. We could take out the overlooks completely, but that would be a real detriment in terms of our charge. But then we have to find some compromise with the NRC. And thankfully, some members of the NRC and Delia were in favor of finding some useful compromise. So in terms of benches, we could or we could not have benches. Either way, I think the point of the overlooks is simply to let people see the river.
Right. I mean,
I was
because there's
actually
also
wondering-
this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to bring up, I had the thought a while ago that we do have the interpretive sign for the Wild and Scenic River, but one thing we could do, I'd rather not, but we could do is move the interpretive sign. We could move it out of away from the overlooks. We could even move it outside of the 100-foot, just barely. We could even take it completely out of the eastern section and move it into the triangle as sort of this way to the Wild and Scenic River, or put it in the kiosk at the southern entrance. And those are not my ideals, but if it came to a point of trading with the NRC to have the overlooks closer to the river so that you could actually see the river, or having the overlooks be large enough so that a family group could stop there and admire the river together and say, that's so beautiful, or even look, there's an otter. I think it's something we should consider as a trading item if push comes to shove.
Right. And I think, welcome, Linda. So happy to have you. Linda Escobedo just joined our group. Yes, I agree. And I think on the sidewalk is where some of that discussion can happen, because that's just what they just want to be able to eyeball it to get a sense of what they can and can't support. They said over and over how much that they're supportive of the idea in general. They just have a hard time visualizing where exactly things are. And they also don't really know what, it would be good to be able to point out the extent of the invasives, et cetera, et cetera. There is one deal that we had to strike, which is too bad, but I've come around in that they don't want, and here comes Peter. I by mistake muted myself, I think. Welcome, Peter. So happy to have you. Admit. Sorry, folks. I'm trying to admit Peter.
While you're doing that, I'm thinking too, creating an overlook or maintaining an overlook also means managing vegetation. I think that's something we'll need to keep in mind when we're out there. It's like, nice to have a little place to stop. But if it means, continually keeping trees and vegetation out of that view shed, then that kind of raises a different question as far as the NRC is concerned.
Right. There's a factor there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree that being on site and seeing those spots will help us kind of determine the best use.
It really will. The other thing that they wanted, and there was no negotiation because Sue can attest, I tried, was the art plinths. They're very happy to have them over here. They do not want them in the conservation restriction, except they were willing to put them over here, which I get. Bill, is anything that's colored here, anything in color, is that the conservation, the zone of what will be the conservation restriction right down this line?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Hold on, it is, except that there is this minuscule little triangle at the extreme point below the kiosk there that's outside of the 100-foot wetland buffer. And in theory, we could fit smart plinths in there that would be visible from the rail trail. And the NRC was okay with that idea.
They were.
But we would have to obviously tinker with the boundary of the conservation restriction if we wanted to do that.
They were, that was their negotiation, was to put, if we wanted to put a couple of stands for art plinths here to put them somewhere in this area, even though it is still in the conservation restriction, as opposed to throughout. So I
Interesting.
don't know. Go ahead.
That's interesting.
In a that we can do way, or that's or not, you don't think it's possible way?
We can do it, but I don't think it's worth doing. We'd have to cut down mature trees to put them down there. I think we just make the triangle now the more active spot, and this becomes a more passive recreation along the riverfront, which is essentially what they're requiring, other than we have the recessed lawn. And the art plinths really would go really well over there.
I know it. But I don't think it's a negotiation point unless when we get in there, we can convince otherwise. Sue, what is your impression? Because you were there.
Well, my impression was that they were really concentrating on the 200-foot riparian boundary, which I
Yeah.
don't recall having come up in any of the information we had previously discussed. And that is somewhere in the middle of the assisted living complex and completely kills our doing anything at all on the eastern parcel. In fact, they did not like our nice little cauliflower, even the remaining one, because it's in the in the 200-foot riparian
Yeah. They were pretty restrictive.
region. Yeah,
They're fine with this, though. They
We're
were
allowed,
fine with this.
we're allowed to render a portion of the outer riparian zone impervious under the regulations. But they can push back on that anyway. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
even their idea was that as for our last little cauliflower area there, their idea was that, well, if it's cut off from the assisted living complex, which it would be because that's what the assisted living complex wants, then what's the
Right.
point anyway? And they pointed out to us how no matter if you have so much as a piece of metal in the woods that's 6 inches high, they get horrible complaints from the public saying, I went for a walk in the woods and I saw something that wasn't 100% natural. I'm outraged. And so that's why they were pushing back.
To
But-
which I said, there's lots of debris in here anyway. And so that argument doesn't necessarily hold. It's not like this is untouched area, but
we get to push back against them, but that's
Right.
their initial bargaining position. And they have a lot of power.
yeah.
They do in this area.
So this kiosk then area, this becomes an interesting point of an important point of interest. And so I think we just talk about it. We continue to talk about it. I mean, I wouldn't be, Bill, I'm not sure that it would be impossible to have 1 or 2 plinths here somewhere in this kiosk area and then focus the others over here.
Well,
Um,
I want to bring up so that the kiosk is in the assisted living complex area because they're allowing us to do that. And it would be great to put kiosks there, but we would have to get the agreement from from all parties. So
Grantham.
housing
Mm.
development.
I think we're gonna need an easement. I think
Oh.
they're gonna need to grant us an easement for the path.
And if they would allow us to include art plinths in that easement they granted us for the path, then that would be an excellent location for them along that little section of path. And I don't think we'd get pushback from the NRC on that. The NRC's point was, well, we could put them outside the 100-foot on that tiny triangle, although, like Bill points out, it wouldn't be worth cutting the trees down. But
No.
yeah. But we don't have control except for asking for it over the path.
Liz, what are your thoughts? I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but what are your thoughts about this issue of an easement? You're talking about this bill and this anyway as an easement?
Well, I mean, so it would be, I don't know if it's really an easement because it's a ground lease. So
Oh.
So it wouldn't really be an easement, it'd be just something in the lease that would allow that to be there, right? I think that it would be a provision in the lease somehow. I don't know.
Is Grantham the leaseholder? Who's
So
the
the
leaseholder?
CHDC is the property owner and
Oh,
they're
you're
gonna
the
lease.
property owner.
Yeah,
Well, then you could, yes, you could grant an easement to the town. And they would have to amend their leaseholder agreement to accept it. I think that's how you'd probably have to do it. Because you
Well, I
wouldn't want
would-
to spend a lot of money building something that doesn't have the right for you to maintain it and protect it and do all those kind of things.
I don't think the town owns anything here.
Correct.
what
Well,
am I missing?
That's true.
So
You,
CHDC is the fee owner of the land, right?
of all of
Yeah.
the land.
Of all the land.
Oh, okay.
Do we want, this is Peter, I'm just wondering if we want to, if the NRC doesn't want us to develop in the 100-foot buffer zone adjacent to the river, why don't we just give it to them?
I don't know what that means exactly.
I mean, give all the
Well-
land to them? Right.
Yeah, give that land to them.
Right. All right, I don't know about
Is
that.
there an open space requirement? Like, in other words, does the footprint of the development require a certain amount of contiguous open space?
No. no.
Does, but it's already on the lot that is being leased to them.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess a bit, aside from that, like, so we could work out the contractual aspects there, the legal framework. But it's in the driveway as shown here, right? Like when,
Right.
you know, so that seems a little like it can't really be in the driveway, right?
Oh,
It
you
will be, it will be adjacent to and slightly lower than the driveway.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like it's going right all over those contour lines, right?
Well, it won't.
Right.
We have,
So,
so this
yeah.
is just a schematic design still. So we haven't done any kind of meaningful grading and drainage. And I mean, you can see that our path goes over a drainage outfall, and that'll have to change too. Either our path will change or the drainage outfall will change, or both. So we have some detailed stuff to get into. We're just trying to pin down the overall concept, which we'll then implement. We'll move into the next phase, which is design development, where we figure out exactly how we're building this, what we're building it with, and what our budget and phasing will be. And then when
Bill-
that phase is done, we go into construction documents where we actually prepare the documents for bidding and construction.
Bill, what do you envision to be the distance across? And I know this is just conceptual, but as you envision it, what do you expect there to be the distance across this opening kiosk over here?
Something like a 30-foot radius,
Yes, yes, me too.
not
Um,
radius, diameter. Sorry.
Yeah. So.
30 feet
and-
across.
And
Yeah.
then how long, just eyeballing this, how many feet around is this before we get into the into the actual CR?
Oh, well, you can
Uh,
tell by comparing to the difference between the 50 and 25-foot lines, gives you a bit of an idea.
Well, it's about 60 feet, I'm gonna guess.
This, thank you. This is about 60 feet.
60 to 70.
That's plenty of space to do something with.
Yeah.
There's
I-
plenty of room for plinths there. And by the way,
Absolutely.
in terms of the kiosk being shown over some contour lines with the slope, if that's where benches are, since benches are raised off the ground, they could easily be sort of set onto a slope.
Right.
Well, what we'll do is in all likelihood, we'll dig into that slope and have a low seat wall or a small retaining wall, 2 feet or something like that, which will put this whole system a little bit lower than the adjacent sidewalk and roadway. So we're separate from it. And then we'll design the path to meet whatever the zoning requirements are. very much like the outlooks. They are not set in stone. If we get out there and we find that there's a big tree in the view shed, we can move
Right.
it to the left or to the right.
Right. That's what I was saying to the NRC. And, you know, I think in the end, I was probably not the right person to present to them because I don't have the technical expertise to understand how to read this. But I, you know, I did what I could. I hope I didn't, you know, get us, you know, set us back at all, but I think we're okay with them. I mean, they, you know, they were very enthusiastic in the end when we went to the we went to the second meeting. But I do think this has to go, and I know the plinths have to go. But all of this, it felt to me, was all going to be fine, all protected. And they don't really have anything to say about this. They didn't even want me to talk about it at all.
No,
And
they
they-
don't have any say. Yeah.
No, and they weren't worried about this either, frankly. You know, so,
I mean, if you go out there and we stand them in the middle of that depression, we're gonna just simply tell them we're utilizing the existing depression.
right,
That we're minimizing the earth moving because that's what we're doing here.
right.
Exactly. Their only question about it was, that's an existing depression. They were
Yeah.
concerned until we clarified that, yes, that's what it's like
Right.
already. And after that, they were cool.
Right. Does anybody have, I was going to stop sharing this unless anybody has any comments about it that we need to talk about, including Bill.
If I can just explain, this is a glorified cartoon.
Yeah,
So everybody needs to understand that I haven't done detailed design. I'm just trying to get a concept that we can buy, the concepts that we can buy into. And then we're gonna drill down into it and really start talking about materials, placement, sizes, dollars and cents, and all those kind of things. But yes, I mean, what you've done so far with conservation and their requirements, I was just thinking, instead of the plinths, we could do something else. We could do sod stumps that are preserved on the outside that would act as a art holder.
No, actually, their concern wasn't just that they would be permanent plinths, but that there would be anything non-natural in any way, shape, or form.
but
Yeah,
we
they
can, right. But Bill, hopefully you'll be on that sidewalk and we can talk about it with them
Right,
and
Right.
see, you know,
bring a picture of what we're talking about.
and just see if there's any wiggle room. I don't know.
And well, I'd be interested to hear from others too, like how, I mean, it's nice, like public art is great, but like, I mean, someone has to manage it, someone has to organize it. You know, what's the driving vision behind having plinths everywhere?
Right. No, it's a good question. I mean, I think ultimately what will happen is there'll be a friends of for this that will watch over it. And again, the sort of driving idea behind it is that there's just an enormous community of artists, and we saw it with the Muscataquid art, you know, sort of natural art shows on the Amble, how vibrant and lovely it is, and how it can really accentuate a public space. And it was just part of the conversation of making this not very unique, but this unique space very interesting. And so it was just part of that, Krista, just enhancing the space if in any way we could.
And the
Well,
thought
I guess-
about
Those,
well, the thought about using, you know, a natural rock product is it doesn't actually have to have anything on it. It in of itself is a little monument to itself. So it doesn't always have to be decorated. It will withstand the weather.
Mhm.
And it creates diversity in the park. It opens up for yet again another user, another experience
Mhm.
without a whole lot of real maintenance. If somebody wants to take it on, that's great, but otherwise we've got these simple monuments scattered around.
Mhm.
I'd like to follow on what Carlene said by noting that we specifically have an art community, not just in Concord in general, which we do, but in the center of West Concord. And so this would be directly adjacent to them and particularly appropriate for some West Concord located group to put their art in. That
Well, yeah, I think
But I
that's a
don't
good, yeah,
impact
sorry.
the river area.
I think that's a good point, and we all have different perspectives, I think, on this, and part of the perspective I think is important with this is where this is and what makes it unique. And it is on prison property, and we did have Sam Williams in on this earlier, and like, who is the park for? And this is an opportunity to really, have this park be for a large community of people who live right next to it, which are in the prison.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the focus, which I think is awesome, it's about the environment and it's about, this, but a lot of the focus is on this conservation, kind of like, how can we get more out of something, kind of swimming upstream with the conservation restriction. And where there's an opportunity here really to make this park be for people who really haven't been, don't have a lot of place that is about them. So it's really more about the content, I think. So, whether there's, artwork in that area or not, I don't think is really that critical.
No, it's not that critical. It's just.
Yeah,
one-
but I think when it does come to the content side, it is critical to be inclusive and really to get, okay, what makes the most sense from a content perspective?
You mean in the interpretive, you mean in the educational panels, Harry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, we all have, that's true. And I think it's important to say that we all have different ideas. That's why we have a committee. We brought different ideas. I know that's important to you, Harry, and having some opportunity to showcase some of our artists wasn't something that was important to me. So we brought it, and others on the committee. So we brought it. If all of that has to be scaled back, it does, but I don't want to take it off the table yet. Entirely. Because I
Take
think
what off the table?
the idea of having any sort of public art in this area. I don't know if that's what you were suggesting. I
I mean,
don't-
if it works, it doesn't seem as critical to me. I think that area that's outside of the conservation, which is the natural, which is the western, triangle, and then if there's another area down there, if that fits, it is kind of like, it seems like it's off, on its own, but.
But it is an entranceway. It's a gateway to the
Yeah,
area.
yeah. So it's important, and it would be great. It would be great to have something there. And I think though that when we get to the, the park and kind of what's the purpose for the park, like what's the, who is the park for, and that's is important too. And it's not just about the environment.
Oh, agreed. Peter, I see your hand up, but I wanted to acknowledge Steve Urza first, because I saw him raising his hand, not with an icon, but with his actual hand. So Steve, you have something?
Yeah, I just briefly wanted just to say on the river overlooks, they're since they're not cast in stone, and the NRC is okay with the location inside the buffer. This is reminiscent of in Wells, Maine, there's the Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge, where they have this path on the inside, but they have sort of a spoke for the overlook where you can actually, it's like a short path, and it would go closer to the river, and they have marsh there as well. So it's this dramatic overlook that comes off the path, and it's square, not round, but it's just fabulous, and it's stunning, and just figured I'd throw that out.
I know
Thank
that one.
you.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve. And I just this last week discovered the Trail Through Time in Acton. I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's exquisite, and it has all sorts of interpretive panels throughout, all next to the river, because it was a force for commerce through Acton. And I was going to take some photos of that. Maybe I'll take a journey up to Wells, Maine too. And because I think, I think it'd be helpful to show people what other
Yeah.
communities are doing.
Yeah, I go up
Um,
there quite a bit, so I could take a picture too.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Peter, go ahead.
So my question was, I recall last summer that the bikeway actually had art displays throughout it. And I'm wondering whether or not, rather than push against the NRC, maybe we focus a little bit on utilizing the working with bike way community and reusing that art space, maybe shifting a couple of plinths there.
Oh, you're muted, Carlene.
Sorry, I love that idea too. I think in the end, we'll have to sort of get the concept. I don't think the NRC is going to interfere, is not the right word, but for lack of a better word, I don't think they're going to talk about try to insert themselves down to the level of where I think that will ultimately be our decision, Grantham's decision, CHDC's decision. I do think that there'll be some area to showcase some local public art. Harry, I would love to apply for a grant and have some of the artists be members of the prison community. That's what my ultimate.
Yeah, I think
that's not the charge of this committee, I think. But just to finish my thought, I think
Yeah.
that there are ways to incorporate the natural elements, the prison elements, all the things that we're talking about. I don't think we need to get into the weeds too much about where the plinths will be, except that they have to be out of the two, and Sue can correct me, but they have to be out of most of the 200-foot riparian zone. And so whether that's putting a plinth or two in the 30-foot kiosk, that area, the entrance area that Bill's talking about, or as Peter so smartly just said, along the rail trail, there, and certainly some in the triangle, then I think I'm not willing to give up on that yet, but I don't think we need to spend any more time of this meeting talking about those, except that they need to come out of the area along the path, and we'll negotiate. It's a long process. It's years long process. So I don't think we need to figure that out now. Does that make sense, folks?
Yeah, I do want, for the record though, I do want to say that I'm sensitive. I've heard from Delia that not everybody liked the art on the amble, and I do want to speak for those people who feel that nature does not need to be enhanced a lot necessarily. So and this is kind of site is the best of both worlds, because we have the more developable part and then the river part. So I know I'm on one end of the spectrum with that view, but
and we might end up all with you. I think we're going that way for the most part anyway, Krista. But let's just not turn off the lights to all aspects of it today. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bill, can you educate us on what I'm confused about how much tinkering we can and should do before we bring this prime time again. I just don't know the process, and I don't want to sort of, keep pelting you with these small changes, but I also want to make sure that when we go to town meeting, we have something that's close to what people feel like they can support. So can you educate us on what we can do and what's possible between now and when we go to town meeting for the actual plan?
Well, that's kind of your decision to what degree of accuracy and information do you want to present to the town? Because we're always going to be tinkering with the plan because of cost, because of materials, because of location, and probably from some other community input. Generally, we recommend that you keep it as conceptual as you can to a town meeting, because you don't want to be specific. You want to be general. You want to say, we want to develop a path. We want to do it this long. And here's the criteria that we've learned from various entities on what we can and cannot do. And we've addressed those in our conceptual plan. Because when I start getting into design development, that's when I start spending 20 and 30 hours a week on the project and really start getting into the weeds. And then when we get into construction documents, we get to construction documents when the design is set.
Yeah.
I don't let you change things unless
know.
there's a super hard reason, because the design is then set. And then I'm doing nuts and bolts. I'm telling the contractor what size nut it is and what kind of steel it's made out of, and that kind of a detail. So if we start changing things at that point, the house of cards falls apart. But that's what I recommend. All these little tweaks are advised, and they're good at this point in time, because number one, you're showing that you're agile, and you're showing that you're listening to people, and you're taking their comments in hand, and we're not getting into exactly how we're going to build it, or we're not getting into, as I've asked before, that semi-realistic photo rendering of what parts of the park are going to look like.
Okay.
I don't think we want to take that to town meeting, because this isn't a building like a school or anything like that, where you do want that kind of a sales pitch, because they take it to that level. But for a park and for an outdoor facility, we really, if this were a sports field complex, then I'd take it to that level. But
Okay.
this is something we still haven't identified all of, as we're discussing tonight, all of the design inclusions and exclusions, the art, where the art's going and how we're going to do it, whether you want
Okay.
plinths, maybe you don't want plinths. So that's what I'm thinking. You want to keep doing these little changes. And that's how we want to take it to town meeting, unless the board wants to go in a different direction.
Can I just
Arlene,
ask
are we gonna
also-
have another public forum too?
Yes, that's part of our charge, and we've been adjusting the schedules a little bit, but yes, Liz can help us with this a little bit in terms of timing, but we did want to have another public forum with the most recent iteration before we go to town meeting.
Well, and we said our public forum would be sometime in January, but it seems to me we absolutely positively have to deal with the flagging before then, because a giant open question is just where can you see the river from? And if the answer is, well, you can't really see the river from anywhere, then there's no point having overlooks. And if the answer is, well, you have to be within the 25 foot in order to see the river, then we probably still can't have overlooks, because it's just not allowed. But how can we say anything unless we know where you can see what from?
Well, we know that the embankment is more than 25 feet horizontally off the river. So we know for sure that we're more than 25 feet from the edge of the river. And I flagged the river and we surveyed it. So from that perspective, we know where those items are relative to the design. Now, whether there's a big tree exactly in the line of sight in the center where we put the overlook, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, would be an obstacle, and we'd move it sideways, north, south, that kind of thing.
Right, but like you say, the design is more like a cartoon, and if we need to move things a little bit, we can, but it's more an issue. At first, the NRC wanted us to completely move the overlooks outside of the 50, and we weren't willing to cave on that point. If you can see the river from outside of the 50 foot, then maybe that's something we could do, but we just don't know.
Liz, would February be okay? Because it's already January 6th. Is the second week of February okay for a public forum?
Sure. I mean, I don't really have any, whatever works for the project team. I don't have any additional information. So we have, the public forum and then the site walk for the public. So I just wonder what's the order of those? Would you have the site walk and then the public forum and all that? And then what do you need to do before the public forum in general?
So I guess
think-
we would need to flag and then choose right to have the
Do we
flagging.
really need to flag though? I guess there's a little, the CHTC will talk about this next week, because that's not in the original scope. And is that really additional expense that's needed now?
It's pretty expensive.
It is expensive and it's not, and I guess part of what I'd like to understand also when we start talking about some of these things is which elements are in our initial phase versus, because we're looking at the plan which is all the phases. But yet, you know, we're asking for money, which has been reduced even, right, for the ask. So our phase 1 is kind of scaled back, and then it's a whole nother year for phase 2. So how do some of this further definition relate to phase 2 versus phase 1? I just want to understand how it plays out from that perspective, because it feels like we're doing the total picture now, but that's not the reality of how we're going to operate.
Well, this is an issue for the NRC. They were pretty insistent that we needed to flag so that they could do a site walk, so that they could make their decision about whether to recommend in favor of the project, to what degree, which we really need in order to get the CPC to vote in favor of our project so the town meeting can approve it. But maybe we could go back to Delia and say, is there some alternative to flagging? Because this is expensive. And
Yeah, well, can't we just put it on a handheld like our GIS and go out in the field and stand, you know, if we get the design on a CAD into GIS, and we can just go stand there and say, this is, you know, this is more or less where the overlook is supposed to be.
I love that idea, Krista. Can you help me talk to Delia about that so that you'd have the better facility of language to explain to her that, rather than doing the formal flagging, because it's outside of our budget. And actually Delia is very sensitive to budget. I mean, because Greg Higgins wasn't. He was like, let's do this and let's do this. And Delia was like, well, they have a budget and they might be at the end, the ceiling of their budget, right, Sue? Like, she really understood that.
yeah. Bill's
And I think it'd be helpful to know also, to be pretty clear about our first phase scope versus subsequent phases.
Yes.
Yeah, and perhaps
ahead, Peter.
that's what we should be presenting, is the first phase scope and anything in the area close to the river that is impacted in the first phase scope. And therefore the plinths and the area, you know, we can say, we've heard you, we're moving them out of the area. We're not, you know, we're just not even gonna cite the observation overlook at this point, because that's phase 2. We're just making sure that we can actually see the river. And, you know, we'll drill down into the details in phase 2, when we'll be coming in with the flagging and stuff that you're requesting.
Sue, do you feel like they'll go for that, Sue? I mean, they already gave us the letter of support. It's just that we need them to be on board.
They gave us a
Letter of support really just says minor tweaking, you
That's
know,
right.
so it doesn't say, you know, we want it flagged, right? Like, they weren't specific in their letter of support.
No.
The
Okay.
CPC seems very inclined to support the project at a lower dollar amount.
At 225, at 250, absolutely.
Yeah.
250.
So I don't think that doesn't feel like a risk area to me.
Okay.
Well, it would probably be a good idea just to check with Delia to say, look, we think that can be the tweaking and that we don't have to flag now, but we're just checking.
Okay. All right. So with that, Krista, you'll help me frame this so that it doesn't sound, because we want to absolutely do what the NRC is asking, but you're, I think, proposing a very reasonable alternative to what they asked for, a more formal thing, but I think you're going to help me frame a little bit of an alternate offer.
And can I just say one other thing?
Yes.
I'm sorry. And we can't ask the Grantham group to fund any of this. I
Okay.
know that there was some thought, well, you know, they'll fund this, or Greg maybe suggested that, but I just wanted
Yes.
to be sure that it's clear to this group that's not a possible.
Okay.
fund.
Yeah, he thought maybe Walter could throw it in because so much was being flagged or engineered out in the middle part. He thought maybe someone could just throw it in, but I understand, Liz.
So I just wanted to, and on that, that the residential portion is delayed. So there's a dependency that the projects have together.
Mhm.
We haven't really talked about that. We've really operated them, independently and just sort of, assuming it's all going to work out time-wise, but the project is delayed. So what does that do to this project? I don't really know, but we'll have to eventually unpack that more.
Could you explain delayed in what way in terms of a
So
shovel?
their
thing?
construction costs have increased so much during COVID, right? That's no surprise that that would happen. It's a large residential construction project. And their awards of funds, which were substantial, were based on a construction budget pre-COVID. So they are working hard. They put many years into the project and they have a lot of commitments. And they've been creative about what they're going to do about that, but it's a delay for sure.
Delay
Mhm.
until 2023?
No, they're working on it, but they should have closed by now. So we know it's a delay because they're not closed, and they don't have resolution for their open items. It could be any day. I mean, they're working on, I don't know, whatever they're financing, bridge loan strategies, and it, it's quite complicated. But it is open. So I don't know what to say, except for that it's important to recognize that there's a dependency between the projects. So even if they said that they were ready to, let's say they got everything in place, they're probably 9 months to close once they really say they're ready. So I don't know. But so you have a dependency with the CPA funds and town meeting to get the money. Then there's the phasing of your own plans, and then there's the residential portion also. So,
But we don't
so
want to
there's a lot-
start construction on this until Grantham is starting construction on theirs, because we want to use their machinery. And we also want to use some of that dirt. Is that right? So,
Yep.
so are you saying that there's not going to be any construction on that site in 2022?
I'm not saying that,
Okay.
but I'm just saying that they are not moving right now.
What happens, and I don't think this is something we have to answer tonight, but what happens if we proceed as if they're going to construct this year, and they might, and we get the money for, voted for our project by the town, and then the Grantham Group does nothing this year? And as Carlene says, our schedule is dependent on their schedule, and we postpone everything by a year. Do we have to give the CPC money back, or can we just postpone it?
No, you just don't draw it.
That sounds good.
It'll come with perhaps, you have to use it in 5 years. Sometimes they have that in there, sometimes not. It can be extended, so it's appropriated. And you're a multi-year ask anyway, so you'll just proceed and you'll ask next year. So you'll be amassing your funds and
Well, that's
so
fine.
it's just something to work on. You're not, all I'm just saying is you're not operating in a vacuum here relative to the residential portion.
Bill?
Just 2 points. I have a hard stop at 6 o'clock because I have
Okay.
a 6 o'clock meeting. But the other thing is our phase 1 is cleaning up and starting the invasive species remediation
Mhm.
and cleaning up parts of the site, and then starting the grading for the path, which can be pretty much independent of the housing development. So if we choose to proceed this year, it's all preliminary stuff in phase 1. And it does not rely on the Grantham Group at all, I don't think.
Okay, wonderful, Bill. Bill, before you leave, and I know we have 3 minutes, can you look at your calendar and tell us what a 5 o'clock evening that in mid-February that you is open? Just while we're here, do you want to look at that quickly? If we're looking at our calendars, how about the 10th or the 17th? I don't know what school vacation, we wouldn't want to go into the week of school vacation, so the 10th or the 17th, Bill,
Yeah, I have the 10th open.
but not the 17th?
I have both open.
Okay, so keep those, we're not gonna make a decision now. I just wanted to see if you had those open. Thank you, and thank you for coming tonight. And I'll be in touch offline about what next steps are with us, okay?
Yep.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay,
Um,
good night all.
Bye.
Night.
Harry, are you also leaving at 6? Harry,
Yeah, I'm off. Thank
do
you,
you have
everyone.
the 10th and the 17th open, February 10th and 17th open, 5 to 6:30, say, on those nights, Harry?
Yeah, I should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for coming tonight, Harry. And if you have to go, that's fine. I just wanted to see your availability for those nights.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Carly and I can't do the 17th. I could do the 10th.
You can do the 10th. Okay. I see everyone checking their calendars, which is great. So as I look at our discussion, we're actually following the agenda beautifully. Discussion for request for NRC flagging. We're going to deal with that, strategizing for an upcoming public forum. That will probably be the 10th, but we'll see how everyone's schedule pans out. Next step for CPC's vote. I think that's just, getting on and continue, and I'll just continue to do that, go to the meetings and protect the family here and make sure that we stay on track. It is very important to be at those meetings. Yes,
Don't they-
Krista?
So they have to vote like imminently because the warrant closes?
There's some controversies there's some deficits and some controversies about some other projects, and I think they're unwilling to take a hard line. I don't blame them, and so I think they're resistant to actually saying no to some people and saying yes to others. And so we'll see how that happens. But yes, it's coming. I mean, it has to.
Well, they don't
and-
exactly have to vote it before the warrant closes. They can put things into the warrant, and then when the article gets moved to town meeting, they can say, well, look, we've taken this out. Of course, any citizen could then say, I move to put it back in, but except for spending a lot of time on argument, it's pretty much guaranteed to fail in the end.
Yeah. We might take another hit of another 25, but I really hope so. Hope not, and really fought, really tried to say that at the last meeting, and people agree. I think it was saved, but we'll see what happens. In terms of a site walk, what should we do about a site walk?
Well, it's, I'm sorry, Krista, go on.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like ideally it would be great to have a site walk and then the public forum so people have a chance to actually see the site and then respond to designs. But of course, like seasonally, that's challenge because it's not going to be the prettiest time of. I mean, we could have a nice snowy day, but the way things have been going, it's going to be gross.
One thing about, seasonally is right, like there's no leaves out, so that makes things a little bit easier. It's parts of the site are easy and parts of the site are just difficult, right? To, at least for me, to imagine and see, even to see, right? And but yeah, I mean, it's cold and it's hard and all that. So I don't know when you want to do that, right? That's up to you.
Well, it's cold, but if it means that people see all of the strings of horrible bittersweet vines and all of the old refrigerators and beer bottles, then that just will focus their minds on how much nicer it will be if we actually clean the site up.
Would we do that like on a Friday at noon? Would that be a good time to do a site walk? What, Krista, you know what it's like to do a site walk for public. What?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to make people give up their weekends, but it does, you do get people who work and
Okay.
it's hard to limit it to just non-working folks on Fridays.
That's a good idea. So what if we were to, weather dependent, schedule like a Saturday, the 29th, and then with February 5th as a backup, weather-wise, and then both of those things would allow, both of those are still before the forum. How does that sound to folks?
Yep.
I'm happy to lead that site walk, and we have to see what Bill is up to, but if members, I know I'm available those times. So if members of the committee can't make it, that would be okay. How does that sound to the group?
Sounds good.
Both days,
I'm good for the 29th, but not the 5th.
Okay.
Same.
I could do
I-
either.
I guess what I could do is set a public forum, public meeting for both. And if the first one comes off, we just cancel the second one. But I get it on the agenda. I get it on the town's website for both. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, and that gives you some leeway with weather events too.
Right, so that we have a backup if one is bad, and then I don't know what we do if both are bad, but how does all this sound to you, Liz?
I can't be here for either one, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, you're here. I wanted to just offer once the triangle got marked, the work that Bill did, it was so surprising to me how close the triangle is to the buildings at the prison.
Oh,
And in fact, I was shocked. I really thought we were further. So I really thought that having some screening on that part that overlooks the prison is going to be really important, because otherwise you're just looking at the storage shed and it's very close. So there's just, so I don't know, just interesting. So when you go and see that, you'll get an appreciation for that. And then on the 2 dates, I mean, I think you were going to, right, so you can see that building right there.
this,
Yeah, it's very close.
yeah, it's right there.
It's right there. And when you walk in there, you can see there's the path from the prison that looks like it's actually prison land. Like you wouldn't ever think that this was really part of the triangle. I mean, it
Okay.
has the prison, Jersey barriers, is that what they're called?
Yes,
Yeah, and so it looks like that's where they would drive in. So, but that's actually already on the triangle. So it's really, it's really surprising. And then if you make the second date on the 5th, that you would call that a snow date or a
Yeah.
makeup date. I mean, if you present them as 2 equal dates, people might choose like, oh, I won't go on this one. I'll sign up for this one.
oh,
So if you
Which I
present
could
them
do.
equally, yeah,
I
but
could
then you
do
have to
2
be prepared to.
sidewalks. Yeah,
Then you have to prepare to actually do 2 sidewalks.
which I could do. What, does anyone have, what's the will of the group for that? Krista,
I
what
think
is your
you just do
thought?
one. I think
Do
you
one,
just
okay,
I think.
with a
We'll do-
snow day,
Yeah, we'll do one
proposed
and
this.
call the second one a snow date, maybe.
okay. Did you get those dates down, Steve? Because I'm not taking notes on what we're talking about.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Let's make one more thing. Let's have another meeting before all of this so that we can strategize these things. So I'm just gonna call, and I just think it's easier to do it all together. So I think we should have one more meeting before the site walk. So if today is the 6th and the site walk would be the 29th or the 5th, right? Do people mind meeting on the 13th or the 20th?
Well, the 20th makes more sense to
Yeah.
me
Me too.
for the part where it's special town meeting and we can't possibly meet on the 20th. Well, what's wrong with the 27th? I mean, we could do the 13th, but
Wait,
Okay.
what time does special town meeting start?
7 PM, but you have to schlep over there early, if we're having a
Yeah.
physical one. Well, it has to be physical. It'll be indoors in 3 different, it's gonna be a mess. Yeah,
How about the 27th, folks? Sound
That's
okay?
good. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
That
Krista,
might be a tiny bit late.
no problem.
I have it on my calendar already. Isn't that your regular meeting time?
Probably is, Liz, probably is. So perfect, already in
So
your
I was gonna
calendar.
show up no matter what, right?
Okay, so we've got a bunch of time scheduled and I think it's wonderful that we were able to accomplish all that. I'm gonna adjourn the meeting in just a minute. But so hang on just a second. Should I have Bill take out all of the plinths? And is that what I should, so for the iteration that's gonna be shown at the public forum, should I just have him take out the plinths and then leave it at that?
I think that we should wait until after the site walk.
Okay,
In case something comes up important at the site walk, because we don't want to go back to him twice and. have
Right.
to twice.
that is exactly right. You're right, Sue. Okay. All right, so, is
And
there any?
maybe make a just accumulate your list of the
Yeah.
changes you want to make so that he kind of can focus and do that.
Yep. And I'll present that list at our next meeting so that we can all tweak it together, give it to him at that meeting, and then he'll be able to do that work before, around after the site walk, but before the public hearing. Of the public forum. Make sense, everyone?
Yep.
Okay,
And the other thing for the public forum too, I think would be to focus a little bit on the phasing, because that was late, for the last time.
yeah,
And just to be clear about how that works and, yeah.
for the public forum, to be clear, like to
Yeah,
have a
just-
slide on phasing.
I think so.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
with money would be helpful, but at least function.
Yeah, he's done that. He's laid
Yeah.
out all the numbers now. We have that now, so that we'll be able to do that, I think, quite easily. We'll
Do you
come up
have
with-
that? I don't have that. I have the initial one, but I don't have anything new on that, on
I
numbers.
think he has recently given an email, and I thought your name would have been on it, but I will send to you my most recent email from him, and we can
Perfect. Thank
look
you so
over.
much.
My pleasure. Okay, is there any public comment? Anyone? Linda or Carlin, anything that you wanted to mention to us before I adjourn, or Peter? Go ahead, Carlin.
Carlin Reed, 83 West End. Good job, guys. Keep it up. NRC can be interesting to work with, but you're doing a good job. Keep it up. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. So with that, at 6:09, Steve, I guess I will do a roll call for adjourn. Sue?
I favor adjourning.
Krista?
Aye.
Steve?
Yes.
Aye for me too. Thanks, everyone. I'll be in
All
touch.
right,
Take
thanks.
care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.